Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Julia Martel. I am the Visual Arts Manager here at the Umbrella, and let me tell you what, we've been looking forward to this day for a long time. Didn't know it was going to happen, and then Elise agreed to join us, and I know that this is a really big deal for all of us at the Umbrella. This program is a part of our exhibition, Leaving an Address, which was our spring show, and it was a two-part exhibition. The first part was here in the gallery. It was a textile-based show. You'll see some pictures of it through our presentation here, which we will put on the website in case you missed the indoors. Some of you just came from the second half of the exhibition, which is an outdoor walk in the Walden Woods, where we are really bringing history alive through the genius of Marla McLeod, our curator, based on our other genius, Elise Lanier, historian. Two of our panelists today, also with the executive director, Kat, from the Walden Woods Project, and Joe Colombo from Concord 250. We're so excited to welcome you. I'm really excited to hear all of these brilliant minds in conversation. There are some refreshments in the back. If the fans are a little too loud, we can turn them on and off as we go because it is a little warm. So let's enjoy and take it away. Thank you all so much for being here.
Let's start the conversation. Well, thank you all for attending here today and coming together to listen to us talk about how art and history come together and has come together within this space. How do we want to start it? You wanted to? I don't. Oh, this is our, okay, as we go through the slideshow. Yeah.
You're gonna ask
You're asking questions. Okay, excellent.
So I'm Joe Palumbo. I work for the town of Concord. I'm also representing the Robbins House. I'm the co-president of the Robbins House, and all this work together. If you haven't been to the exhibit or the installation, there's a piece there called The Prospector. And it really stuck out to me today because it makes me think of all the work that this community's been doing with the help of the Umbrella and partners, from Elise's work through the last 20 years, Maria's work, to really unearth and tell the full story of Concord. And I thought that today and the work that you all have done is helping us do that. So I guess the only question I have is this intersection between history and art. Do you have any thoughts you want to start with on that? Because you mentioned it and it seems so important to bring these stories in a way. Some people, it needs these beautiful pieces. So I don't know, Elise, do you want to go first?
I don't mind starting unless you want to start.
Oh, I don't mind. I don't mind either way. You say I'm a talker.
I guess if you don't mind, I'll start because, I love to talk. But also, I grew up next door in Lincoln, and Lincoln was formerly part of Concord. And because of my English teacher here, Susan Winters Fromers, do you flip it? Susan Fromers?
Whatever.
I went into academia to copy her and try to be like her. And so it's very lovely that you're here today, Susan. So I wanted to be like her, but I think she and I will agree that academia comes with a lot of constraints. So the minute you're in an institutional setting as a scholar, there are certain expectations about what you're going to do to get tenure and get promoted. And you're going to do certain kinds of things. And what Marla, if you don't mind me calling you by your first name,
Absolutely.
what Marla's made me realize is how constrained I was, right? That I had tenure when I started Black Walden, so I had some safety. I couldn't get fired for doing this kind of work, and that was important. But I needed to get promoted in order to have a voice on campus, in order to have any kind of power or authority. And that meant writing a certain kind of book that was accepted by an academic press. So I was constrained by a couple of things. The linearity of sentences, right? And I had to attend to facts, and I could only frame those facts with context that I could substantiate. And I was constrained by space and time. I had to say, this happened here at this time. So I see now how many constraints I had. I thought that I was finally seeing Brister and Fenda Freeman emerge from the shadows, but what I want to say to you, Marla, is I didn't see them until you showed them to me. And it's because you're an artist and you can be poetic and dialogical and performative. You can do all sorts of things that allow you to escape space and time, allow you to escape linearity. And so for me, when I first went to the installation last weekend with my mother, I thought, I am finally seeing the community there in a way that I never had. And I know that you're going to say, like, the data was important, and I hear you say that, and I appreciate that I had a role in it, but I think what you showed me is that academia comes with a lot of constraints. And I couldn't summon Brister Freeman. I couldn't bring him into the present, and you brought him into a present that is always already the future.
Right.
And to me, what you've done is just you and Sharon and all of the other artists, and I've asked Sharon if I can write an article about this quilt, which I very much want to talk about, but I just want to say thank you for bringing the community to life in a way that a dry academic book never can. And I also just want to point out to those of you who are local, we've had a replica of Thoreau's cabin for years. We have not had a replica of the Brister and Fenda Freeman house. And now we do, thanks to Ethan's cabin and Sharon's cabin here as well. So now finally we're honoring the ancestors finally, all of the Concord mothers and fathers, not just the Minutemen, not just the authors, in a way that I really don't think a dry academic book can do, but you did, and Sharon did, and all of the other artists did, and I just want to say from the bottom of my heart how meaningful that is for me and for the world. So thank you.
Bringing it right back to you. It is really, when it comes to the art, and you know I'm going to talk about data, I'm a data collector, right? But one of the reasons that I moved into the art space from data collection, I used to do geographic information systems. However, being able to collect that data and put it in really what you're moving into these spaces that are more of the intangible spaces of data and being able to express that meaning and ending in this like sort of community actualization. That's what this ends up being, right? It is without your teaching and leading this author into their research, into what they're doing, without growing up within this community and the stewards of the community that is also currently holding that history. So I, as an artist, come in, or Umbrella, who wants to open up the conversation about all of the things that has happened in this space. You know, it takes a large community in order to do that. It takes having, like, even your history being impacted by those educators. I too am an educator, and it's so in love with the way that history can impact us very distinctly in the here and now, but history is extremely important. And when it comes to very specifically African American history, that is something that is a bit harder to dig into, because you'll often find little pieces of data. And what Elise has done is taking a cumulative look at it, just like the Robbins House is coming in, taking a cumulative look. So we end up having more compacted information, our data sources, in which we can pull out the information about our ancestry. Looking at African American ancestry is actually, again, difficult to do because there are missing sets of information. And by Umbrella doing this, and by you holding, we are able to pull that information out and allow for the African American people who exist in this space in the here and now to be able to relate to that. Right? One of the reasons why I didn't want to do white papers, right? I love to write, and one of the things that I was I've been told several times about my particular writing is that because when I go into writing, it is about the data. I am fact-based. It's all about the facts. So all of the sort of connections and things that you see visually, it disappears in that fact-based word, right? But you can see it in that visual communication. So absolutely.
Right.
I just want to mention a couple of things as you're talking about history. You know, one of the, I'm Kathy Anderson, the executive director of the Walden Woods Project. And so thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all you're doing. It's just a great collaboration. You know, I think storytelling is so important, and to engage people in taking action. And what we have here, as others have pointed out, is an incredible story of two amazing historical figures that took place in part on the same landscape. So we have the land, the place, the history, the legacy, the art interpretation, the literature that Elise has been working on, as have others. And it really makes for an amazing combination to put forth these ideas in the context of the challenges we face today. So all of them are needed. And I'll just say a couple of words about Brister's Hill, which you may have all already know. But, as we sit here today, if things had gone the way that a lot of people wanted them to go in 1990, you wouldn't have been walking on that property. You would have seen from near or far, 147,000 square foot office building with 500 cars parked in the parking lot.
Wow.
And in 1990, that building was fully permitted. It would really have erased an important interpretation of Brister Freeman, of the people of Concord, of Thorough, and now we have this beautiful art exhibit out there, thanks to you folks, and we have an interpretive trail about Thorough, and people can go out there and learn both about Brister and Thorough. And I'll say one other thing too, and that is that, when we first started trying to preserve Brister's Hill, before we even negotiated with Boston Properties and spent 3 years trying to get a reasonable price, have them settle for a reasonable price. It came down from 11 million to 3.5 million, which we luckily raised, and we bought it. Now DCR has a conservation restriction over it. We own the fee, and we manage those trails. So if you haven't been out there, I hope you will. But at the time, our focus was on Thorough, and we knew just a tiny bit about Brister, very little. And I think if you all look back 35 years, many of you would feel the same way. And thanks to you, Elise, and others, we know a whole lot more about this incredible legacy of, African American population and once enslaved people in Concord, and what they contributed to our country. So in 2013, I reached out to Toni Morrison. This was long, obviously, after we purchased Brister's Hill, and having learned more about Brister in the ensuing years, I reached out to her because she had a wonderful project called A Bench by the Road, and it honors people of color who made contributions to our nation over time, basically forgotten. No markers, no houses, as Elise pointed out. There's no symbol of recognition for Brister. And we felt so strongly that had to be incorporated into Brister's Hill. So you'll see The Bench by the Road is out there. We covered the cost of it, and we were proud to do that. And there's a beautiful interpretive stone that tells only a partial story of Brister. But he has become important to the Walden Woods Project in terms of the history of Brister's Hill. And so I just want to, thank you for all you're doing on so many levels to perpetuate that important history.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the quilt for a little bit?
Yes.
Because the artist is here, and maybe Sharon,
Yes.
you might stand
Sharon.
up.
Sharon.
I just asked if I could write an article about this quote because I'm completely obsessed with it. So I would like to say a few things about what it's saying to me, and maybe Sharon, you'll chime in with what it means to you. But, again, I'm really struck by the fact that I am constrained by the linearity of sentences, and when you put different pieces of the quilt together, of course, you immediately are freed of that. But Brister Freeman is buried somewhere in Concord in an unmarked grave.
Yeah.
So if we start to read this in a kind of a book way, and we'll American readers will tend to start on the upper right, because we read from right to left. So in seeing Brister's name with his life days, and we begin by honoring him in a way that he has yet to be honored in Concord. There is no place where he's honored with the gravestone, and the Robbins House has been slowly correcting that for people who are in unmarked graves. So maybe that will happen at some point, but to see that, first of all, just really struck me. And then again, if we're reading kind of as American readers tend to do, left to right, I should have said left to right. Then we see the cabin, and again, this is a replica of the Freeman family's home. And again, more honor. So but I love that the squares function like a map, but the cabin is foregrounded, whereas before it's been erased, right? It disappeared. I'm breezing over a lot of things here because there's just so much to say about this. But the other thing is that really struck me was we see the familiar zip code here, and we see the red, white, and blue, and we start to feel that sort of patriotic pride as Concord and Lincoln residents, right? That and the military colors of sort of that drab brown that we associate with military uniforms. So we start to think about sort of patriotic, maybe even our militarized patriotism here in Concord locally. But then there's this little black square with embroidery on it. Slavery is a hidden word. And again, this is functioning really dialogically for me, because now you have to start to ask yourself questions. How can I feel patriotic pride in a place that also was a slave town, right? So not everyone was an enslaver, but everyone tacitly agreed, every white person tacitly agreed with the system when they repeatedly elected selectmen and their time moderator who were enslavers. So now I have to ask, like, how can those two both be true? Is there a different way I could be proud of Concord as the place where African American residents, Black residents helped to build the town, helped to birth the country? I mean, Brister Freeman's a town father. He's also the nation's father because he was in the military.
Yeah.
And the name Brister Freeman, by the way, has been translated into 60 languages, right? Because Thoreau has made him an international figure. So he's a local figure, he's a national figure, he's an international figure. This quilt, the artist took it out to the homestead to photograph it. And just think of the performative element of the piece, right? It's artisanal, it's a quilt, it's there to make you warm, it's pictorial, so it's here to convey a story to you. And there's a tradition in the African American community of using quilts to tell family stories, so it's part of that tradition. Think of Faith Ringgold, right? I mean, she works that really hard. So now you're asking yourselves all sorts of questions, and then you get to the apple tree. Well, Thoreau tells us that Brister Freeman planted apple trees, right? But here the tree it's literal, it's an apple tree, but it's figurative, it's family, it's a family tree. There's the lace here. Brister Freeman was gifted to someone on there as a wedding present. He was 9. So there's tragedy here, there's triumph. There's also poetry because there's this wordplay. Brister Freeman as a child for a quarter of a century was enslaved to John Cumming, who gave the money to Harvard to start the medical school, which means Brister Freeman's labor
Founded the Harvard
Medical School, and people around the world need to be thankful to him for all that he did, right? So now there's wordplay, becoming a Freeman. So taking John Cumming's name, playing on it, this sentence to me is what is happening in Concord, right? I mean, now I can begin to feel a new kind of pride, a different kind of pride. But the performative aspect that I just mentioned really briefly, taking it out there to the homestead and saying to Brister, like, I'm nurturing you, I'm covering you, I'm making this quilt for you, I'm telling you your story. That performative part for me was really important. And I just want to say that for me, this quilt is everything, and I would love to see it hanging in the Concord Museum next to John Cummings' walnut desk, because I think that's a conversation that would be amazing. Anyway, I don't care, you probably have more, you probably want to add more to it, but to me, like that's what I see. That's what I see just out of the beginnings of what I see.
It's actually ironic too. It's been an exact year when I finished your book. I was living in Portland at the time, and I had happened to just bring, as a quilter, as a textile person, you travel with your cloth. And I happened to have done a series of plant dyes from my garden. And when I finished the book, I set the book down and picked up the gray tonal with the cabin. Those are dyed with, I used my marigold plants, but I added a lot of iron into the bath. So it grayed down the yellow. And I started with strips, kind of hand stitching a log cabin. But I knew that was going to be where there was going to be the home. And then I want to say it took 6 months to do this quilt. And I worked on it a little bit each day, but each day it went through major changes. I would put something down, I even had African cloth in there, and it felt wrong. So my daughter, who I taught to quilt, and she actually has 2 quilts in 2 museums as permanent collections, I used her as my go-to to help me sort of navigate. And I started doing things in a very literal way, but I felt I'm better doing prompts because coming from so many years as a teacher, I wanted this, my children were educated here in Concord. They went to Neshoba Brooks, they went to Fenn. I wanted students, young people, to be able to say, well, why is Brister's name there with lace? Like, I wanted that dynamic of asking the question so that stories could be told. Why is there lace? Well, at age 9, he was the wedding gift. And I think learning that for me, 9 years old, I have an 8-year-old granddaughter. It was a trigger for me. It was very emotional. I was part of one of 2 Black families growing up in Harvard. So I did feel a sense of isolation. It was funny, my children said, Mom, it's like Brister kind of took residence inside of you. And it became an obsession. But I needed to finish it. And I needed to finish it for Concord 250. And there's a whole nother story about that situation, but I won't share that. I will say that this quilt was never meant with an intent to be a protest quilt. It was designed to be an educational story narrative quilt. And I intentionally traveled around seeking out the different cloth so that it would transport you into a time that felt like Brister's time.
I do have to say a special little story about this quilt and how it came into the exhibition. The title of the exhibition is Weaving a Dress, and one of the things that we wanted to do was weave together the history of African Americans in this space and what is now African American existence within this space as well. And doing that in the indoors, it was all textile-based work, really specified with the weaving. And during the actual install is when Sharon came into the building for looking for a space for her quilt. And we were at that point installing the weaving an address and exhibition, like this exhibition for the indoor. And that particular piece very specifically was the connecting, like a very visual connecting point of what that history was outdoors to this weaving portion and the current history of today on the indoor. So we were able to put that into that space and literally, figuratively, visually create that line of connection through time and space, which was really just absolutely awesome. You could not even ask for such a thing because we had so many textiles indoors, but none of the artists, having had working so much on the outdoor work, didn't have time to create new textile-based work for the indoor, and it came anyway. Very specific and very much so about what we're talking about here. Love that.
I want to just pick up on something you said. You have a design about storytelling and not necessarily a protest. And I just want to reflect a little bit, for those of you who are aware of the work that's been going on in Concord, that even though we're trying to tell more broader and authentic stories, it may not always be protest, but it's certainly advocacy. There is an incredible amount of advocacy work that has to go on continually to keep these stories in front of people in a community that, left to its own devices, reverts back to the norm of what it's accustomed to. So your work is incredibly helpful to us in that. I mean, Brister's you were at Brister's Hill. The only reason there's even a marker there is the advocacy of the Robbins House. The only reason there's even an informational marker is the advocacy of a high school senior. That is not done by the town of Concord. That's done by individuals in the community pushing to tell the full story. So even though it's not necessarily protest, gosh darn, you're helping us.
Can I just clarify what I mean by that, so you have a full picture? And I don't want you to think that.
I just appreciate it, is all I'm gonna tell
Well,
you.
what happened was, this quilt was done specifically for Concord 250 at Concord Academy. And when I volunteered to help set up the show and asked what section the quilt, whereabouts it was
Right.
gonna be placed, so I could put it in the right
Right.
spot, I was told that, oh, my quilt was designated as a protest
Right,
quilt.
exactly.
And that was, that just
Exactly.
was so unsettling for me.
Right.
And the reason it landed here was because on that particular day, I drove my daughter to Neshoba Brooks for her to do an art presentation on her career. And I thought, I'm gonna be in Concord, I'm putting the quilt in the car, I'm gonna start at Concord Museum and I'll end at the Umbrella. And I just went into each place and did a pitch.
Wow.
And
Wow.
landed at the
Get
Umbrella
it right
on
place.
the day before the install.
Oh,
The ancestors are working.
Yeah.
Good job.
So it's about being persistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was unsettled
That's
at
right.
this being called a protest.
Yes,
Wow.
yes,
Wow.
yes.
It's
I hope you told them that. So the question I have is, you referenced before we went on our walk about how, even though we're talking about history, we're making history.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering, either from you all or from others, when people look back at what we're doing in 50 years, 100 years, what do you hope they remember or say about the work that you're doing, about this work? What do we hope people say that we tried 50, 100 years from now? What do you hope they say about us?
Oh, well, for me, as an artist, in my practice, it is the same thing that I always hope that the work will do, is just continue to tell that story so that it in fact becomes one of those things, in which the same way that I was using Elisa's work and also the work from the information collected from the Robbins House as a jump off point to look further into certain information that might interest you, right? So for me, we're gonna do an exhibition where I need to find some information, and you created a source of information, an access point, right? And by you all, what I also think is that by everyone being here and everyone engaging, even as an audience, as a community within Concord, you keep that history alive by being people who are collecting those stories, and then now you know them as well, right? And even if the art is all gone and the books are all gone, you still hold that information, you hold that knowledge as an individual in this community.
I'm going to say that I hope that my book continues to be corrected, and by that I mean that as I've gotten older, it's less about my ego, and I delight in watching, people like Tammy's here and Beth, and there are other folks in the room who are like correcting things that I got wrong, adding to things that I didn't know how to do. So now I've finally grown into a place where I'm really comfortable and happy about watching things be corrected and changed and grown and taken over, and someone carrying the torch forward. Another thing I love about the quilt, I'm sorry, there's a little black piece of fabric with kind of a white design on it in the bottom middle. But it's the bottom, even further down. That was, yes, that one. To me, that feels like the future. Like, it's a writing I can't read yet. It's kind of like a writing I can't see. To me, that is something about the future where someone else is going to step in and say, well, Lemire got this wrong. By the way, in my book, which I wrote a while ago, I refer to slaves, and now I don't feel comfortable with that. I would have said enslaved people.
Yeah.
I would have not made a slave, you know what I mean? So things like that, I would like to change. But I'm going to let the next generation do that. And to me, that little moment right there, I thought, oh, that's the writing I can't see yet. And that's you, like, just, bringing the future into the now so that we can grow into it and something new can happen. One of the questions I have, which I'll ask back to you, is in the future, should the town consider renaming some of the places? I'm sure you've noticed that places named after white folks in town have their last name.
That's right, that's
Places named after the formerly enslaved have their first name. So it's Brister or Breister. I love that you are calling him in a different way. I am here for that. I am loving that I've now heard his name in a new way. And a bunch of us have been saying like, we're very excited about it. But anyway, so should we now be saying Freeman's Hill or Brister Freeman Hill or Brister and Friend? Like, should we be continuing to be renaming things, or should we say that's how it was called in the past? And I don't know, but I wish I could live to be like 200, and, not whatever it's going to be, because that's one thing I'm really curious about. Like, what happens to the naming? I see the portals being open to like, future writing, but I want to know about the name. What do you guys think? Like, should it be Brister Freeman's Hill?
Yes.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
Brister's Hill.
Right.
Right.
And especially that his last name was so important.
Yeah.
Because he was declaring himself a free person. Even more reason. I
Yeah.
think. You didn't ask me, but.
What do you think as someone who was there and has, the place has been,
Well,
you've been in it for 2 years?
Exactly, as you're thinking about African American history and that importance of naming very specifically and that use of that last name. Breister Freeman very specifically chose his last name to be
Yeah.
free.
Yeah.
He's not
Right.
Brister Cumming, he's not Breister Cumming,
Yes.
he's Freeman.
Breister
Freeman.
Freeman, exactly. And that in and of itself is something that is very important. But I think also, I have to point out, and this is a little bit off topic, but that sort of connection to the here and now, as we are looking at the quote, this memorial rock that exists there right now, which is there, and you look at the rock and then you can actually go out there and see that rock. It is bringing another point that brings that history, that future,
Yeah.
the present, and the history into one space. And one of the things that I would appreciate about this moment is the fact that we are altering the history. We are writing the new Concord history. So
That's
as
right.
we move forward, one of the things that could be written is how we gather in this space to talk about this, and that naming and that renaming. It's like some people prefer to keep old names and so on and so forth, but
That's the
as you move through history, things change, names change, and they change for different reasons, and the differences in those name changes reflect the communities that they are within. And so as we move forward in 100, 200 years, how wide of a history will the naming of the spaces within Concord really hold? How wide could it possibly be? Because I'm sure it goes deeper than African American history, right? Like, let's take a few steps forward, but
It's
I
that
think
tough.
that the community actually being involved and thinking about and talking about and being informed on why it could even be a possibility is important. And you all hold the space, like everyone in this room is holding the space to have those conversations.
How about from the audience questions?
I was very intrigued by that question. And I'm Sarah Madison from Lincoln, and I'm with the Lincoln Historical Society, and also with the History Lecture Series, and we're struggling with this. Not struggling, we're trying to advance it. We're trying to be part of the spaces, the stories, and advance them and expand our understanding. And I would say our objective is for 50 to 100 years from now, these not be African American history, Native American history. This is our history.
Yeah.
This is U.S. history. This is Concord history. This is Lincoln history. It is comprehensive. It is inclusive, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we recognize it. And I have noticed a reluctance to take steps forward with acknowledging it. And I believe, and come to believe, that's because people do not want to be confronted with the concept of obligation. Once you embrace this idea of who built us, who helped build us, could these farms in Lincoln have existed without enslaved people? Could the land in Concord have existed without the indigenous people, the First Peoples, having farmed it and cleared it in certain areas?
Right.
What are our obligations beyond just telling the story? Because we have kept these very peoples not just out of our story, like this story, but we have kept them out of the ability to access resources and assets the same way we've been able to. We're building on what they gave us, or what we forced from them, what we took from them. So I suspect we all, you in Concord, we in Lincoln, are feeling reluctance to take that next step in the conversation of embracing all of our histories, all of the voices, and all the living lives.
I paid a teeny bit of attention to the potential renaming of a renovated school in Concord. The town carefully avoided going deep and chose a middle of the road name, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We struggled for over 18
And
months.
the comparable story in Lincoln is that the Commons, which is the retirement community there, my mom lives there, they named the main building after Chambers Russell, who's one of Lincoln's largest enslavers. And they refused to change it even when presented with the comprehensive history of the town. So again, a similar story.
So we're actively avoiding facing our past.
Well, it was it was fascinating. It was one of the comments that, through that whole campaign, and we were trying to end at school. We were building a brand new school for the first time in 50 years, and we got an opportunity to name it after Ellen Garrison, famous black educator. And the school had no existing name, so it seemed like an easy win. It was very difficult, but it was fascinating because one of the arguments were, "Well, I've never heard of her." Like, well, that's the point. That's what we're talking about. Sorry.
Well, people at the Commons say it won't solve anything.
Yeah.
But it does.
It does.
But-
Second.
Well, the catharsis the town had to go through to get as far as it got was an education
Yeah.
for people for good. We're better than we were before because we went through it. We didn't get the outcome we wanted, but
I would love to talk about that piece on the right.
Yes, absolutely.
Can we?
Yes.
I had some thoughts, but my reading was slightly different than what you said over in the woods, and which I love. I love
This one on the love and belonging?
Yes, I want to talk about that.
Yep.
I love it. I like to talk, so sorry.
Yes.
You know how if you think of traditional like Greco-Roman statuary, right? Like you go to the Boston MFA or you go to the Met. You get a plinth. Is that what it's called? A plinth? A plinth. Sorry, a plinth. And I was thinking about plinths and how they're meant to sort of elevate a statue, and they're typically like a column or whatever. But here, the plinth is the work baskets that could be filled, as you said, like with apples or with strawberries. And I love the idea of elevation, but elevating someone through memorialization of their labor. I just thought that was amazing. And I also, you were saying that there wasn't a head on it because you didn't want it to be representational.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking too, for me, my initial thought was, in taking away the head, it was also, for me, kind of worked metaphorically in terms of slavery as a wound, but I think that's not what you were necessarily thinking.
I've done those before.
But then I was thinking that even despite slavery, right, and like the way in which the body and soul are wounded, to be able to birth out of yourself this figure where it appears to be rising, right, because like the hair is going up, and you get this sense of something really powerful coming out. I was also thinking about, I hope you don't mind, I mean, again, like these are just my thoughts about it, but I was thinking of Black Panther and the ways in which the figures started, the costume director who's won 2 Academy Awards.
Yeah.
The first Black woman to win an Academy Award in costuming in Hollywood, if you can believe that. All right, so she talks about something called Zulification, which is like drawing on a lot of different African traditions to depict a kind of warrior figure. And that was something I really took from this, and I thought, like for someone my son's age, and also for me, but I thought this is just an image of such great power. And then I know you said you got the mannequins from New Balance, but the ways in which, like, when you put your arms behind you, like your muscles kind of become defined, but it's also a way of saying, like, I'm here with such pride and power that I can be peaceful, that I can put my hands behind my back, not because I'm being subservient to you, but because I have this sort of, this peacefulness and this powerfulness. And I guess I just wanted to say in front of you, to see if it resonated with you. This was a moment where I just thought, I could really see like the power coming across space and time, still existing in the moment. And I thought, like, you see him, and now I can see him. And to me, this was just a moment of just such resonance. because of all those things going on for me. And I know for you, you analyze it kind of differently, but I wanted you to just know how much it meant to me.
I love that. Like with art, as artists, we create the work, right? And then we put it out there, but you want it to be, regardless of what it means to me, especially as someone who is really trying to give over information or allow people to learn from whatever it is, having ways in which that piece of work is accessible to the viewer in different ways, as long as it
You're okay
grabs
with
you.
the alternate
Yes, I am
interpretation.
happy with it, right? Because as soon as you go in, when you go in for the interpretation, you may interpret it in whatever ways, but I have put in very specific things and used very specific models in order to create this particular figure, right, for this space. And it is that deity. It is, in essence, calling on, again, that love and belonging, this sort of connection.
Yeah.
So it being that connector for you in this space is perfect, right? That means that as a work of art, it's doing what it should be doing, right? And I appreciate that. So thank you very, very much.
I just think it's beautiful, so thank you, Marla. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. My name is Gail Hamilton. I'm a curator based at Harvard's Hutchins Center for African and African American Research. And I was telling Marla earlier that I came across Elisa Mayer's work 10 years ago, and I wanted to do an exhibition in the Walden Woods a decade ago. I just never got around to it and 1,000 other things. But there's another chapter in your book about the Codman murder that I want to talk to you about because I'm working on a public art project.
Well, let's talk, because when we talk about the future, another thing I would love to see in 100 years, if I could come back and haunt my hometown, is the Codman Estate change their signage.
Right.
Because they still advertise as a place to get married. I almost got married there. I ended up getting married at Cordova Museum, which was wonderful.
Dodged a bullet.
The thought that I might have unknowingly gotten married at a place where people were enslaved I've been deeply upsetting. And so they're in process. They're making changes. They have new tours. They have new, but the signage when you drive by on the street, it's called an estate.
I would say that this particular piece, once it's completed, we might rename Cotton Square in Dorchester.
Oh, are you actually creating a piece for it?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a very long story.
Yeah.
Okay, wait.
It's the darker part of the history.
So in 1755, 3 enslaved African Americans named Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe were tried for murdering John Codman. And the Codman estate is actually the home where Brisker Freeman's family was enslaved.
Oh, wow.
So it was initially Chambers Russell estate. John Codman was Judge Chambers's, ward. He's an orphan, so that's what I learned from Elisa's book. But in any case, they poisoned John Codman. And Mark is executed and his body is hung for 2 decades in present-day Somerville. And Phyllis was burned at the stake, which is unusual because they didn't even do that to the Salem witches. There's only one other reference of a burning of a woman at the stake, and that also was an enslaved woman named Maria. So when I had been approached by the Boston Public Art Triennial 2 years ago, initially they asked me about producing a performance work, a durational piece in the Charlestown Navy Yard. And because I had heard about Mark's execution from another artist named Pamela Council, I kept thinking about a durational performance that could sort of speak to the hours and the kind of years in which Mark's body was hung, but at the same time embodying his last testimony, essentially. He kind of gives a speech before his execution. But as I was going through the documentation, I began to understand that Mark was throwing Phyllis and Phoebe under the bus. And as a Black feminist artist and scholar, I had feelings about that. So, and then I broke my ankle, so I couldn't do a performance. But as I went through the documentation, it occurred to me that it needed to be a film. And I see it as a 3-channel piece where Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe get to tell their varying stories.
Wow.
about the murder. So I have
Including why Mark wanted to kill John Connor.
Yes.
That's so important.
Yes.
So rather than focus on
Yeah.
rather than focus on the murder, I want to talk about their daily lives and what that would look like to lead up to those decisions to take on such a risky and murderous scheme.
And maybe the Boyle House can help because that story's part of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've done a site. So I'm working with a colleague named Angela Counts, who's a playwright and a filmmaker. So we're storyboarding, writing a script right now. The Royal House has agreed to let us shoot some of it there.
Great.
We've got some seed money, but I have to raise 6 figures to do this. In order for it to be a public art piece that has some ability to be flexible. So perhaps like, having a screening at the Codman Estate and having, other screenings in Codman Square, right? But to make a piece that's nimble, right? That has a kind of physical space. I envision it as screens inside an attic space because that would have been where Mark, Phyllis, and Phoebe lived and slept because the garret is the attic, right? And it's also the triangular slave trade. Anyway, I've been thinking about this for 2 years. I don't have all the money together, but I just wanted to say how grateful I am to Marla and to Elise and to the town of Lincoln and Concord, and all of the folks and the artists that have contributed to this history because it's deeply informed the research that I've been thinking about and writing about and conceptualizing over the last 2 years. So again, I can't thank you enough. I do have a curatorial question about the works themselves and particularly the tree and all the pieces that are hanging. We were thinking about, I guess, scale in terms of like the large kind of canopy of the tree and then the kind of smaller sort of shapes. And those I'm assuming are very deliberate decisions on the part of the artist. And so we were thinking about that, just scale and time and place. And then with the different altars, my vision is sort of down on the figure, but then it made me want to think about almost kneeling to some extent. It felt almost kind of sacred. Mm-hmm. So we were having lots of feels, even though we were frustrated because we were struggling to find the wayfinder, but it was fine. We actually found all the work as we kind of wandered through the woods, and it smelled beautiful. So again, we were in our heads and in our bodies and sweating the entire time. But also too, like kind of wrestling with like, what do the pieces mean? How do we engage with them? What is the story telling us? And so I kept thinking about how uncomfortable I was in my body, but thinking about how Brister and Fendo would have been the level of the lack of access and resources that they would have had living in those woods, dealing with bugs and no plumbing and just thank you.
I absolutely
There's some
love it.
close-ups of the jugs of the tree.
Oh.
You wanna?
Oh, sorry.
We're passing around the cooker. But
I'm on summer break from my teaching duties. I forgot. Oh God, what about this?
the Phyllis.
Yes.
Oh,
Right.
this is the Prospector,
Oh, I'm just.
and this is Perla
I can't go
Mabel's
quickly
work.
through these because they're
Yes.
so amazing.
Perla Mabel,
Beautiful.
Yeah.
and this is.
This is it, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
In the trees, you'll find the bottle trees. And I just want to
There's
say,
more,
yes, with the project with Phyllis, Mark, and Phoebe, one of the main things that stuck out to me about that story and reading it in Elise's book was the fact that you can go through historical documents, American historical documents, and as you're reading them, there will be those notes on this essentially road marker. And that road marker was
Paul
Mark's
Revere.
father,
Really?
right?
Paul
And
Revere,
so
huh?
like using like the implications
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
and how that stands, and then we create, like literally creating a new space, creating a new marker within that space. What are you going to encounter? What do you need, what do you need to be aware of when you enter this space this time, right? Where's your way? I so appreciate that. I so appreciate it. Look at that. You see our future already. You know what's coming.
Well, I think it's open, one more, because I just watched the time from Marla.
Yeah, so I can try to make it quick, right? So everyone, my name is Tammy Rose. I run Transcendental Concord, which is a social media group.
Check it
Also
out.
a playwright.
Very good.
Yes. Please make friends with me.
I sort of have a challenge, I don't know, because I'm sort of inspired by today. I love the idea that you're putting like Malcolm X and Cato, right? Like all of these names like in a physical space. And Kathy, like I love that space. I love the Walden Woods area, and I feel like I never get a chance to actually visit it enough. So like, is there possibly a way that we could do something that is sort of more permanent? That we could create, and maybe to challenge the umbrella as well, to sort of like keep activating that space with those names and have them there on a regular place so we can go visit them, so we can acknowledge that this is where they live.
Yes, about Malcolm X. I just have to make note of
right?
this because
Talk
I
about
was introduced to it from Elisa's book as well. As you go into the footnotes of researchers' research, right, you find all of this additional information. And that was one of the things that I found that that Malcolm X converted at Concord Prison, and that is also the land in which Bryster Freeman worked on. And so that connection to Black American history through time and space and here and now is wild. I get so excited. I'm like, I didn't know this. It's like treasures. I love it.
Is, yeah, the breadcrumbs, you just kind of follow.
Oh yeah, and you never know what you're gonna find in there. Just like, and then you make those mental connections, like the soldiers who were fighting, the African American soldiers fighting for their individual freedom in a space where the America is fighting for its freedom
Oh my
for
God.
another space. So you have history's beginning in and of this time, and we're here collecting and keeping it going.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
To all the artists, to all the
Yes,
artists.
thank you. Please feel free to gather and talk, and I think there's still some cold drinks back there. Thank you, the umbrella for having us.
Thank you.